From the outside, Trooper Jack Miller and Sergeant Emily Miller looked like the textbook definition of a power couple in blue. Both were members of the State Highway Patrol, both wore their uniforms with pride, and both had spent the better part of their adult lives serving and protecting. They met at the State Training Academy more than a decade ago. Jack was a senior instructor, Emily a promising recruit who quickly stood out among her peers for her intelligence, calm under pressure, and sharp instincts. Jack, 10 years older, was already a seasoned trooper with a solid reputation. He was known for being meticulous, commanding, and traditional. His colleagues admired his strict work ethic, though some quietly whispered about his controlling tendencies and short temper, especially when things didn't go his way. Emily, in contrast, was warm and approachable, the kind of officer people trusted instantly. She handled tense situations with grace and had a natural gift for leadership. After graduation, their connection deepened. It wasn't long before Jack asked her out, and soon after, they became inseparable. To outsiders, their relationship seemed picture-perfect. They bought a house in the suburbs, took vacation selfies in their uniforms, and hosted barbecues for their fellow officers. Their lives were deeply entwined, same shifts, same squad, same circle of friends. When they married in 2017, the ceremony was filled with fellow law enforcement officers, many of whom said they had never seen Jack smile the way he did that day. But behind closed doors, the cracks had already begun to show. As Emily rose quickly through the ranks, earning praise and a promotion to sergeant, Jack began to grow resentful. The man who had once admired her ambition started seeing it as competition. He often criticized her decisions at work, questioning her judgment and undermining her in subtle ways. At home, the once charming Jack grew distant, then harsh. Arguments became more frequent, usually triggered by Emily coming home late, working overtime, or speaking fondly of her colleagues, especially her new commanding officer, Captain Rachel Stone. Emily tried to keep their marriage afloat, making excuses for Jack's behavior and brushing off his outbursts as just stress. But those closest to her noticed the change. She stopped going out with friends, pulled away from coworkers, and often seemed tense, like she was constantly walking on eggshells. Still, they maintained the image. The Christmas card photos, the joint patrols, the couple's dinners with fellow officers. It was all part of the carefully curated facade. Jack made sure no one saw the growing distance between them. He was too proud to admit their marriage was failing, and Emily was too afraid or too loyal to leave. But that fear would soon be replaced by something else. Hope. And it came in the form of someone wearing the same uniform. Someone who saw her not just as a colleague or a wife, but as a woman trapped in silence, desperate to breathe again. It started innocently, like these things often do. Captain Rachel Stone had recently transferred to the same district barracks as Emily, taking over command after the retirement of a long-serving superior. A 42-year-old veteran with a sharp jawline and sharp wit to match, Rachel was widely respected in the department. She was tough, fair, and known for mentoring younger officers, especially women trying to find their place in a male-dominated world. From the moment Emily began reporting to her, there was a spark. It wasn't romantic at first. It was professional admiration, mutual respect. Rachel saw in Emily a woman who was intelligent, competent, and yet quietly burdened. She often stayed after hours, working late with Emily on administrative tasks, shift reports, or department audits. They'd talk about cases, then about life, then about everything else. The walls Emily had built around her personal life slowly began to crack. She confided in Rachel about the increasing tension at home, how Jack had become cold, dismissive, and aggressive. She told her about the emotional distance, the way he monitored her movements, and how he dismissed any show of independence as betrayal. Rachel listened without judgment. She didn't push. She didn't pry. She just offered something Emily hadn't felt in a long time: safety. And when Rachel finally opened up about her own story, how she had spent years hiding her sexuality to protect her career, how she had once fallen for a fellow female officer but walked away out of fear. Emily saw herself reflected back. Two women in uniform, bound by duty, shackled by expectations. Late-night texts turned into phone calls. Innocent jokes became personal compliments. And then, one night after an off-duty charity event, everything changed. In the quiet of Rachel's car, under the dim light of the station parking lot, they kissed. Emily cried afterward, not out of guilt, but relief. For the first time in years, she felt wanted, seen, understood. Rachel wasn't just a superior officer. She had become a lifeline. What started as emotional intimacy quickly turned physical. The affair intensified in secret, stolen moments during lunch breaks, overnight work, conferences, and weekends where Emily claimed to be visiting her sister out of town. They communicated through encrypted apps, careful not to leave traces. They knew the risks not just professionally but personally. Jack's behavior had become erratic. He was drinking more. He'd show up unannounced at Emily's work. He'd demand to see her phone. He'd accuse her of cheating, though he never guessed it might be with a woman, let alone her commanding officer. That blind spot gave them more room to move in the shadows. But shadows have a way of revealing secrets, eventually. And Jack Miller was about to uncover one that would set off a chain of events no one could stop. Secrets, no matter how carefully guarded, have a way of seeping through cracks. And in a place like a state police barracks, where gossip spreads faster than dispatch calls, Emily and Rachel's affair was playing a dangerous game. At first, their behavior went unnoticed. After all, it was common for officers to be close. Long shifts, high-stress calls, and the constant proximity bred a type of camaraderie that outsiders often misread. But to those paying attention, something felt different. Trooper Derek Collins, who often worked the same shifts as Emily, later testified that he noticed Emily becoming more distant from Jack, but way more at ease around the captain. Another officer recalled how Emily would light up when Rachel entered the room, a stark contrast to the tense silence she shared with her husband whenever they crossed paths at work. Then came the text message, a moment that changed everything. Jack had grown increasingly paranoid. He'd always had control issues, but lately, they'd evolved into obsession. Emily had changed her phone password, locked her laptop, and started putting her phone on silent during meals. He noticed. Every little change triggered something in him. One night, while Emily was in the shower, Jack grabbed her phone from the sink and guessed the passcode, their anniversary date. It worked. What he found sent a shockwave through his world. There were no names saved. Rachel's number was simply listed as R. But the messages told the story loud and clear. Flirty texts, late night, I miss you messages, photos, voice notes. One even said, "You make me feel like I can finally breathe." He read them over and over again, growing more furious by the second. And then he did something even more calculating. He took screenshots, dozens of them. He transferred them to his own phone, printed a few, and placed them in a manila folder, which he hid in his garage behind a row of paint cans. But Jack didn't confront Emily. Not yet. He was quiet, eerily so. He needed to be sure. And that's when he started following her. He'd swap shifts under the guise of overtime, lingering around the station longer than necessary. He parked down the street from Captain Stone's apartment complex and waited in the dark. He tailed Emily's car when she said she was visiting her sister. What he saw confirmed everything. Emily and Rachel entering the same hotel together. Hours later, they emerged looking like two lovers after a weekend away. Jack now had what he needed. Not just suspicion, proof. Back at the station, whispers began to swirl. It started with a joke from a junior officer. "Captain Stone's been spending a lot of time with Sergeant Miller, huh?" Then came the locker room comments, the glances, the knowing looks. Emily and Rachel tried to keep their distance in public. No physical contact. No extended eye contact during briefings. But the truth was leaking, and in a world where discipline and order were sacred, Their affair wasn't just personal. It was professional suicide. Jack fed the flames without saying a word. He dropped comments during squad meetings. Some people around here don't know how to keep it in their pants. He'd make passive-aggressive remarks about favoritism, leadership ethics, and keeping your personal life out of your duty. Colleagues started choosing sides, though no one knew the full story. But behind the scenes, Jack was planning something far more sinister than office politics. This wasn't just betrayal to him. This was humiliation, public, professional emasculation, at the hands of his wife and another officer, a woman. And Jack Miller didn't forgive. He retaliated, quietly, methodically, patiently, because in his mind, Emily didn't just cheat on him. She disrespected him. As a man, as a trooper, and as her husband. And for that, she would have to pay. On the morning of May 14th, Jack Miller sat in his patrol vehicle outside the precinct, sipping coffee from a thermos that had long since lost its insulation. His eyes weren't on the entrance. They were locked on the rearview mirror, watching as Captain Rachel Stone's black SUV pulled into the parking lot, followed minutes later by Emily's car. She got out, dressed in full uniform, badge gleaming in the early light, her hair pulled into a tight bun. She looked like everything Jack had once admired and now loathed. She walked straight into the building, barely glancing at Rachel as she passed her at the doors. But Jack saw the glance. That half-second connection. That silent smile. It was enough to send a fresh wave of heat through his chest. That afternoon, Jack used the department's access credentials, ones he was not authorized to use, to pull Captain Stone's schedule. He saw the overlap. Both women would be attending a 2-day departmental leadership training in a nearby city. It was standard procedure. It wasn't uncommon for officers from the same district to travel together. But Jack knew this wasn't just about leadership. They'd be gone overnight. Together. Alone. His mind began spinning. The images haunted him. His wife, the woman he married, the woman he trained, lying in another woman's bed, moaning under another uniform. His pride had already been gutted. Now his patience began to unravel too. Jack made his own travel arrangements. He told no one. Before dawn the next day, he followed them. They had booked 2 separate rooms at a modest hotel near the conference venue. But Jack had watched them. From across the street, from the shadows of the parking lot, and once, from the dim corner of the hotel bar. He saw them leave the lobby, hands brushing. He saw Emily lean her head on Rachel's shoulder for a fleeting moment when they thought no one was watching. That night, Jack drove home with his knuckles white against the steering wheel. He didn't sleep. He sat in the garage, staring at the folder of printed messages, his duty pistol resting on the table next to a cold beer. In his mind, he wasn't just a betrayed husband anymore. He was a dishonored man, a disrespected trooper. His rage had evolved into something twisted, a sense of entitlement to revenge. By the following week, Emily began noticing things. Her car tires were slashed one morning. Her locker at work had been tampered with. Anonymous notes began appearing in her mailbox. "Everyone knows. You've made your bed," she told Rachel. They both suspected Jack. But without proof, and knowing how deeply connected he was in the department, they hesitated to report it. That hesitation would prove fatal. One evening, Emily returned home to find Jack sitting on the porch in full uniform, his cruiser parked at an odd angle in the driveway. He was calm, polite. He offered her a drink, said he wanted to talk. Emily, out of habit or fear, agreed. Inside, the house was quiet, too quiet. No music, no TV, just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of her own shallow breathing. Jack sat at the kitchen table, the folder of texts open before him. "I know," he said simply. Emily froze. He slid the papers across the table toward her. Dozens of pages of messages, photos, and call logs. She didn't deny it. She didn't lie. "I love her," she whispered. What happened next would be debated for weeks. whether it was premeditated or a sudden explosion of rage. But in that moment, Jack stood, drew his service weapon, and with the calm of a man clocking out of a shift, pointed it at his wife. Emily tried to run. There were signs of a struggle, overturned chairs, broken glass. But before she could make it to the front door, Jack pulled the trigger. The bullet struck her in the back. She collapsed in the hallway. He walked over and fired 2 more times. Then, calmly, he picked up the phone and called it in. "This is Trooper Jack Miller," he told dispatch. "Shots fired. Officer down. My wife. She's dead." The call came in at 9:43 p.m. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the precinct radios. "Officer down. Repeat, officer down. Shots fired. Scene is 224 Maple Lane. Caller identified as Trooper Jack Miller." Within minutes, cruisers lit up the quiet suburban street. Red and blue lights bounced off the surrounding homes. Neighbors gathered behind caution tape, whispering in disbelief. Several knew the Millers, the couple in uniform. Always looked so disciplined, so solid. But nothing was solid anymore. Inside the house, Emily Miller's body lay in the hallway. Blood pooled beneath her, congealing on the hardwood floor. Her badge was still clipped to her uniform shirt. A bullet had shattered her spine. 2 others tore through her chest. Death, the medical examiner would later say, had been nearly instantaneous. Jack Miller was waiting in the living room, calm. Gun placed on the coffee table. Hands raised. When officers entered, he stood slowly, said nothing, and allowed himself to be cuffed without resistance. But his eyes, they were blank. Empty. Captain Rachel Stone arrived at the scene less than an hour later, having been notified as Emily's commanding officer. When she saw the lifeless body of the woman she loved, something inside her cracked. She broke protocol. She screamed, dropped to her knees, and sobbed. The raw kind of cry that only comes when the heart is shattered beyond repair. Officers tried to lead her away, but she refused to leave. She stayed, knelt beside Emily, and held her cold hand until the coroner arrived. The investigation that followed was swift but complicated. Jack admitted to the killing. He claimed it was a crime of passion, that he had blacked out after discovering the affair. His lawyer spun a narrative of emotional betrayal, broken trust, and psychological unraveling. But the evidence told a colder story. Forensic teams found the folder of screenshots, carefully organized, time-stamped, annotated. They found tracking apps Jack had installed on Emily's phone, logs of surveillance, GPS data showing he'd followed her across cities. The DA's office didn't buy the crime of passion narrative. This wasn't spontaneous rage. This was premeditated execution. The most damning piece of evidence? A voice memo, recorded by Jack on his personal phone days before the murder. In it, he spoke directly to Emily. "You made your choice. You humiliated me. You don't just walk away from a marriage like ours. You'll see. You'll feel it." Captain Stone was pulled into the investigation, not as a suspect, but as a witness. She admitted to the affair, told the truth about her love for Emily, their bond, their plans to start over. Her career took a hit. Though she wasn't punished formally, the whispers followed her. Some officers viewed her as a homewrecker. Others saw her as a survivor of grief, trying to move forward in a system that wasn't built to protect love like hers. The funeral for Emily Miller was held with full honors, but the ceremony was tense. State troopers stood in crisp formation, but the air was heavy. Some refused to salute. Some turned their backs when Rachel approached the casket. Rachel gave the eulogy anyway. She was more than a trooper. She was more than a wife. She was a woman who finally found her truth and died for it. Jack Miller, stripped of his badge, appeared at his arraignment in an orange jumpsuit. His expression remained unreadable. No remorse, no apology, just the same hollow stare. The media dubbed the case The Badge and the Betrayal, But to Rachel, it was far simpler. It was a love story, interrupted by a man who believed his pride was more sacred than a woman's life. The courtroom was packed. It was the case of the year. A decorated male state trooper, accused of murdering his coworker wife in cold blood after discovering her affair with a female captain. The media called it a love triangle soaked in blood. Headlines screamed betrayal, honor, and forbidden love. But beneath the sensationalism was a quieter tragedy. A woman dead, another grieving, and a justice system trying to peel away the layers of uniform, rank, and pride. Jack Miller's defense strategy was predictable. His attorney painted him as the broken husband, a good man pushed to the edge by betrayal and emotional manipulation. They leaned hard into the crime of passion defense, arguing temporary insanity, citing mental anguish and humiliation. The jury, composed of 7 men and 5 women, watched Jack closely. Some showed sympathy, others didn't blink. But the prosecution came prepared. They called their first witness, Captain Rachel Stone. She walked into the courtroom in full uniform, polished boots, steely posture, her badge glinting in the fluorescent lights. The room went silent. Her presence was a statement. Under oath, she described her relationship with Emily, how it started, how it grew. She didn't flinch when asked if she loved her. She said yes. She was calm until they asked her to recount the night Emily died. Then her voice cracked. Just once. She told me she was leaving him, that she was done hiding. We had made plans. We were going to move in together. She was finally choosing her happiness. The defense tried to rattle her. They asked if she felt guilty, if she thought her affair played a role in Emily's death. Rachel didn't back down. I loved a woman who was scared of her husband, a woman who died trying to break free. That's not on me. That's on him. The prosecution laid out the evidence like puzzle pieces falling into place. The folder of messages, the GPS tracking, the hotel surveillance, the voice memo where Jack clearly threatened Emily. They painted a chilling portrait. Jack Miller, the man of the badge, had transformed into a man obsessed with control. A man who saw his wife's independence not just as betrayal, but as a challenge to his authority. They didn't just want to prove murder. They wanted to prove intent. Emily's autopsy report was introduced next. The coroner explained the trajectory of the bullets. 1 shot to the back, 2 to the chest. No hesitation. No signs of a struggle beyond the hallway's broken glass. No self-defense. The courtroom was tense during closing arguments. This wasn't a man overcome with emotion, the prosecutor said. This was a man who planned to punish his wife for loving someone else. A man who believed her body and heart were his property. And when she said no, he decided she didn't deserve to live. The defense doubled down on emotional breakdown, on the idea of a man who had lost everything and acted in a moment of blind rage. But the jury saw through it. After 9 hours of deliberation, the verdict came in. Guilty. Second-degree murder. Sentence: 45 years without the possibility of parole. Jack didn't react. Not a flinch. Just stared ahead like a man already erased. As they let him out in chains, Rachel Stone sat quietly in the back row, holding Emily's dog tag in her fist. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. Justice had been served, but nothing could bring Emily back.